not be any there could not be better time than this to have a discussion on the future of Hamas, the future of Palestine, after what we have seen in the last 2 years, a deadly, or the rather deadliest conflict between Israel and Palestine, and an event which has changed the direction of this conflict, the future of the key actors who have played a role in this, and has also changed a lot of things. A lot of new dynamics have come up after this conflict. So indeed, this episode of conflict for the last 2 years has become one of the most important turning point, I should say, in the history of Middle East, as well as in the history of Arab-Israeli conflict. And I'm glad, I'm honored on behalf of IDDF. I am extremely honored that today we are hosting one of the most important experts on Hamas and Palestinian affairs, Professor Khaled Al-Hroub. Professor Khaled Al-Hroub, those who have been working on Palestine and on Middle East, they know him very well for his books, for his articles, for his research papers, and for his expertise in the Middle Eastern affairs. Um, Anyone who is working on Hamas, Palestine, and larger Middle Eastern affairs, they know him very well. He was currently he is a professor at Northwestern University in Qatar, Doha, and before that he was also at the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Cambridge, and he had also headed the Arab Media Project. He among many of his books, one of the famous books is Hamas, a beginner's guide, which he had just shown a few minutes ago. Hamas, political thought and practices, and many edited volume on Islamism, political Islam, and of course, Middle Eastern media has also been one of his expertise, on which he has published books and papers. He has been affiliated with many organizations, and among them, I must mention with my deepest thank to him, and where I had met him for the first time is his association as an organizer of the Gulf Research Meeting in Cambridge. Anyone who is working on the Middle East and the Gulf affairs, they have been knowing this mega event of Middle Eastern studies at the Cambridge University in the UK. And Khaled Al-Hroub was one of the main organizers of this mega event in the Cambridge city. And I had the privilege to meet him there for the first time in 2011, where we have been in contact for a very long time. So I'm extremely glad that you have agreed for this talk, Khaled Al-Hroub. I'm completely sure that this is going to be extremely useful for our Indian audiences and for larger other people who are watching and who would be watching on our social media. Just before I invite you, I would also like to introduce my dear friend Subhash Singh. Among very few Indians who have expertise on Hamas and Palestinian affairs, he has a very rich book on Hamas Fatah rivalry, which he had published in 2021. And his PhD thesis, his MPhil thesis, was on Hamas and Fateh. His book has been published by Routledge in 2021. And I must say that Khaled Al-Hroub has been one of the biggest sources for his PhD thesis and in his book. So I would like to invite him to give a brief in a few minutes about his work and his thesis, so that we also have a few some understanding from him. So I would like to invite Dr. Subhash Singh, who is PhD from JNU and who is assistant professor at NCERT in New Delhi. So for 5 minutes, Dr. Subhash Singh, over to you. Mike.
Thank you so much, dear friend Dr. Umair. I have no word to express my uh, feelings because my favorite scholar, Professor Haru, is here. When I started my research work, and I found his book, Hamas, A Beginner's Guide. I had no idea about my research work about Hamas. When I found, sir, your books, I started my journey, and your books play a key role in my research, sir. I am very grateful to you, sir. Scholars like you, sir, who gave a great path like me to understand about ideology structure of Hamas. So, as Dr. Umair Anas talk about my book that was my PhD. So, if you allow me to, I want to show you my book. This is the second. Uh, okay, so, so, sir, in brief, I want to tell my about my books. The Israel-Palestine conflict has been a major global issue since Israel was founded on 14 May 1948. Hamas traces its roots the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamic movement that began in Egypt 1928 under Hassan al-Banna. The Brotherhood spread across the Arab world, including Palestinian areas, after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, inspired by Brotherhood, founded Al-Muzama al-Islami in Gaza in 1971 as a branch of Muslim Brotherhood. By the late 1970s, many Palestinians were disappointed with the secular nationalist group led by Fatah. The Islamic Revolution in Iran also inspired people and increased support for Islamic movement. As a result, the Muslim Brotherhood grew stronger and became more politically active, often challenging the PLO secular leadership. While Israel cracked down on armed resistance groups, it allowed the Brotherhood more freedom because it was not involved in violence. This helped the Brotherhood expand its network and indirectly strengthen the Islamic forces that later Hamas, which Israel saw as a counterweight to secular Fatah-led PLO leadership. Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, was founded in January 1998 by Sheikh Ahmad Yassin. It emerged during the first Intifada as an alternative to Fatah in Palestinian politics. It emerged during before this, the Muslim Brotherhood, the parents organization of Hamas, had avoided active resistance against Israel, which limited its popularity. The Intifada changed this, pushing the Brotherhood to join the uprising for first times. Hamas soon became stronger than Muslim Brotherhood and gained major influence, especially in Gaza, become a serious rival to Fatah and largest PLO faction. This rivalry between Hamas Islamic ideology and Fatah secular nationalism has continued for decades and may persist even after the Israeli occupations ends because it rejects deeper differences over Palestinian identity and future direction. During the Intifada, Hamas grew more active, especially after the PLO criticized the Muslim Brotherhood for staying out of armed struggle. In response, Brotherhood leadership, including Yassin, became more visible and political. Hamas quickly became a strong and organized force, attracting many new support and challenging the PLO long-held dominance in the Palestinian politics. Hamas believed that Zionist project is colonial and discriminatory, working against Palestinian rights such as freedom, self-determination, and return. It sees Israel as the main instrument of this project and considered it a threat of Palestine as well as the wider Arab and Islamic world. Hamas rejected any solution that does not include the full liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. Because of this, Hamas opposed peace talks and considered agreement like Madrid Conference in 1991 and the Oslo Accord 1993 as an unacceptable compromise. It was itself as the main force resisting Arafat approach, calling for continued uprising and rejecting negotiation with Israel. Hamas expanded its influence after the Oslo Accord through armed resistance became a major challenge to both Israel and the PLO. In 1995, Oslo Accord second agreement paved the way for the first Palestinian general election in 1996, which Fatah viewed as a step toward statehood. However, many Palestinians believe the Oslo process failed to deliver genuine independence. Hamas boycotted the 1996 election because participating would legitimate the PA and institution created by the Oslo process, which Hamas opposed, and because it rejected any compromise with Israel. As a result, Fatah won and Arafat became the first Palestinian Authority president. Hamas also boycotted the 2005 presidential election, after which Mahmoud Abbas assumed office, but meanwhile began preparing seriously for the 2006 legislative election. Decline faith and Fatah after the collapse of Camp David to rising corruption within the Palestinian Authority, worsening socio-economic conditions during the Second Intifada, and growing anger toward Israel action all strengthened Hamas popularity. Israel withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, seen by many Palestinians as a result of armed resistance, further boosted Hamas' political standing. Capitalizing on public frustration and promising change and reform, Hamas decided to participate in 2006 election. In 2006 parliamentary election, Hamas achieved a landslide victory, winning 76 out of 130 seats, while Fatah secured only 43 seats. International observers deemed the election free and fair, making Hamas win as a political earthquake for Fatah, Israel, and the United States. For the first time, Hamas formed a government under Ismail Haniyeh, ending decades of Fatah dominance. Unable to accept this loss of the political control, give me.
What happened? Hamad?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Hamas formed a government under Ismail Haniyeh, ending decades of Fatah dominance. Unable to accept this loss political control, Fatah, supported by Israel, US, and EU, took steps to hinder Hamas integration into the Palestinian Authority. Hamas' 2006 electoral victory surprised Israel, which refused to engage with the new government unless it renounced violence, recognized Israel, and accepted previous agreement, including Oslo Accord. The United States and the European Union considered Hamas a terrorist organization, also suspended financial assistance because Hamas refused to recognize Israel over past decade. While external actors imposed sanctions on Hamas, they simultaneously supported Fatah, which Hamas leader called a political conspiracy to divide Palestinians. Tension intensified, and in June 2007, Hamas forces attacked Fatah position in Gaza, resulting in Palestinian civil war. The Palestinian territory and the Palestinian Authority split into two separate entities, Fatahland and Hamastan, called the Second Partition of Palestine. This is the title of my book. In this armed conflict, thousands of Palestinians were killed. After the Hamas takeover Gaza, the several conflicts erupted between Hamas and Israel. The current fighting in Gaza is continuation of these earlier clashes. In this ongoing conflict, many innocent civilians have lost their lives. Here I am going to stop. And thank you so much. I am very nervous because Professor Khaled Al-Hroub is here. Thank you.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
no,
Thank you
not
so
at
much,
all.
sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Subhash.
Mm.
It gives us immense confidence when someone who is staying thousands of kilometers away from Palestine and in a very distant place in a village in India, and then he gets interested into Palestinian politics and reaches to the books like Hroub's and start readings from afresh. So this intellectual journey is extremely meaningful for us, and we should recognize, and we indeed recognize at our center that such scholars who have spent so much time uh, on this issue, they um, uh, uh, have to have this kind of understanding, and they contribute immensely in our society. So thank you very much, Dr. Subhash, for having this important work and choosing Palestine as your thesis in your research journey. And I'm sure that you are going to inspire many more young scholars like you in coming years. And of course, Khaled Al-Hroub has been your inspiration, and I especially told him that Hroub has agreed to come on our program, so you must be there. So he was extremely happy for that. So without further ado, I would like to request Dr. Khaled Al-Hroub, Professor Khaled Al-Hroub, for this for his talk. And you have, sir, like 30 plus minutes if you want to speak, and then we will have question and answer. I'm sure that this important talk is going to educate and inform us, many of young scholars and professors and diplomats who are attending our program and would be listening us on other social media. So over to you, sir.
Dr. Omair, thank you very much for this very kind and very generous introduction that humbled me so much. And thank you for Dr. Subhash as well for this wonderful, in fact, introduction. I am so impressed. You have been doing extremely fantastic, in fact, as Omair said, getting interested in Palestine from very far away. This is what I really like, and I keep encourage my students to go out of their, let's say, local shell and seek knowledge and expertise in other areas, themes, and unfamiliar to their comfort zone and setting. So hands off. Congratulations on your book. I have seen, the cover and title, but I have to admit I haven't read it yet, but I promise you I will do so. So again, with high and great respect to your effort, and thanks to the IDDF as well for organizing this event. It's very timely, and we need to discuss what is happening in West Asia, in Palestine in particular, for so many reasons, not because I'm Palestinian or the events nowadays, but because of the uniqueness of, I keep saying, the uniqueness of the colonial experience in Palestine. And by uniqueness, I mean we have so many exceptional aspects to do with colonialism that are still happening in Palestine, unlike other experiences. We have so many similarities, of course, yet because of the long period of this colonial experience now, getting into the 21st century, and it's happening under our own eyes. This is not history. This is not in the past. This is presently happening. So, and even the genocide that we have seen in Gaza, this is exceptional as well because it's happening again before our own eyes. In every single maybe event of genocide, we would go into the past, try to dig out, the facts, try to find some evidence, and then compose and construct a case about this or that genocidal case. Whereas in the case of Gaza, we have been witnessing this, all of us. It's live stream genocide events, so it's very exceptional. And so I can list many kind of aspects of this exceptionalism, this uniqueness of colonialism in Palestine. In fact, I have to say this is the title of a handbook that I'm editing with a long list of authors, the unique colonialism of Palestine. Now, my talk about Hamas and the Palestinian struggle in general is divided tonight into three, or maybe this afternoon, into three parts. The first one is to do with historical aspects and context that I think is necessary for anyone that wants to understand Hamas or understand even Palestine. To know, we need to have the big picture with us. And the second part is to look into the current state of affairs, what is happening nowadays as we speak, and much is happening, in fact. And the third one is again to take our journey into the future if we can, and do some kind of maybe commentary remarks about the possibilities, what kind of a future is awaiting for Palestine and Hamas in particular. So let me start with the first part, which is the contextual part, the historical aspects that I think we need to have with us, the key notions, the operational key notions that I think we need to have them in our journey. Number one is the notion of resistance. This resistance is a defining feature of not only Hamas, but in a broader sense, the Palestinian people over more than a century. Since early 20th century until this very moment, Palestine and the Palestinian people are living under this colonial case. And if you have a colonial power imposing its will on you and on your people, the first and immediate and natural reaction is what? Resistance. And I keep saying in my talks, it's not only politics, it's not only human even faculty and response. It's also a physical law, Newton's physical law, or about every action has a reaction that is in equal in magnitude and opposite in direction. So if you have occupation, military occupation, if you have colonialism, you have resistance. This is a human history. This is a human nature. So this is number one. We need to have this notion with us. As long as you have occupation, as long as you have colonialism, you have resistance. Hamas, Fatah, so many other Palestinian factions come under this category. This leads me to the second key notion, which is no securitization of the case of Palestine or any other similar case. And by securitization, I mean this kind of attempt, this effort by the West, by the United States, and by Israel in the case of Palestine, to push the Palestinian response into the so-called security and terrorism. So everything is somehow cut out, and then the focus and then the reframing of the struggle comes under the so-called terrorism. And unfortunately, we have seen this in the most recent UN Security Council resolution about Palestine, which adopted, the so-called Trump plan, and perceived and characterized everything in Gaza Strip, in Palestine, from the perspective of security and terrorism. It spells out even the description about Palestinian resistance as terrorism, which is amazing, which is very shocking that 13 countries in the Security Council voted yes for such a resolution that characterizes, the struggle of a people under colonialism and military occupation as terrorism. So these are, I think, not the exclusive notions, but I think, at least for our talk here, we need to keep them in our mind: resistance and the securitization and labeling of terrorism about Hamas or the Palestinian struggle in the larger sense. In fact, terrorism and terrorist organizations, this has accompanied, in fact, the Palestinian resistance from the days of the British colonial era of Palestine, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, then after that Israel, until this very moment. Every single resistance in Palestine was described as terrorist organization, done by the British and then later on by the Israelis as well, and all the way to the Americans and Western powers and Europeans. So this designation is, in fact, this was what Mahatma Gandhi was described as a terrorist. All Indian resistance rebellions, the Sepoy rebellion in 1857, and before that and after that, all these movements, all these resistance rebellions were described as terrorism. So this is not kind of unique. This is not something new. Nelson Mandela, as we know, was designated, labeled as a terrorist, and African Congress was a terrorist organization. So we need to keep this in mind, to reject it. This is not acceptable. We don't accept the framing of any national struggle for liberation and independence as terrorism. This is your language. This is your invention. We don't buy it. We don't take it. Omair mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting that is, that you use in the foundation, you use the term West Asia, denoting the Middle East, which is fantastic, which is great. What is the Middle East? Middle East to what? Middle East to the metropole, to the Eurocentric metropole. It was invented and constructed by the British, promoted maybe by the Americans, and then this is it. We have the Middle East, the Far East, the Near East, all according and calibrated according to the center, which is in Europe. We reject this. We don't accept a naming process that would see us as only appendix to a metropole, to the center in Europe. So whatever is invented in the Western American and Israeli language and discourse should not be taken for granted, and we should even examine every single term. Another kind of term that was mentioned, maybe unintentionally by Omair, is the Israeli in this conflict, the conflict in Gaza, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I don't use this, and in fact, I debunk even the use of conflict in this context, because you have conflict maybe between, let's say, I don't know, between X and Y countries, between India and Pakistan, border, let's say, clashes, or you have conflict between, let's say, in the Arab region, between Morocco and Algeria over the Western Sahara. You have conflict between equal countries, equal parties. But in the case of colonialism, be it in Palestine or otherwise, you have a hierarchy, you have colonization, you have occupation. So it is not equal conflict. When you say conflict, there is an assumption of parity, of equality, which is not the case in Palestine. You have an occupier that imposes its will by force on occupied people, and there is resistance. So I keep saying it's a case of decolonization. It's a case of resistance. It's not a case of conflict resolution. When we say conflict resolution, it's misleading. It's as if you have two equal parties are conflicting over something, and then we need to just resolve this kind of conflict in this way or another way. Now, moving forward, and Subhash, in fact, saved me a lot of maybe historical kind of background. Let me kind of make this jump into 1990s. After the Nakba, 1984, we have Palestinian resistance formations emerging here and there, trying different ideologies. In fact, this is my point, just kind of to emphasize and to prove that resistance is the backbone, the definitive feature of Palestinian response to the case of colonialism. So since 1950s onward, the Palestinians, in fact, deployed and employed every single ideology that you can think of in their resistance effort to Israel and to the Zionist project. They adopted Marxism, so you have Marxist military and resistance factions and movements. You have Pan-Arabist, the ideology of Pan-Arabism, so you have Palestinian Pan-Arabist factions deploying armed struggle under this banner. You have what? You have nationalists within the Palestinian National perspective, that is Fatah organization, and then later on you have Islamist ideology, the Islamist ideology deployed in the struggle. So my point here, apart from the ideological leaning, the coloring of the political affiliation of this group or that group, the common thread is resistance. If you, faction X or Y or Z, if you practice resistance against Israel and the occupying power, then you gain legitimacy. So you have ups and downs in terms of who leads the Palestinian or who is at the forefront of Palestinian leadership. If you want to know who is at the forefront, who is the most popular, who is having maybe the strongest say, examine the resistance component. So if resistance is there as the core vehicle, the core engine of this or that faction, then you would assume, you would think this is, this is the leadership of the Palestinian people. This is why Yasser Arafat and Fatah movement continued to occupy the forefront of the Palestinian scene for many, many years, because they deployed armed struggle, resistance. That is the source of legitimacy in the eyes of the Palestinians. So this is during many decades, 60s, 70s, most of the 80s, the Islamist movement, as again our friend Dr. Singh has already noted, they didn't use resistance. They focused on social work, religious maybe kind of reform, charity organizations, and this and that. So the Islamist, the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the pedigree of Hamas later on, they focused on this. They didn't deploy resistance. So they were more or less marginalized. They used to be on the margins of the Palestinian struggle scene. You have other factions, they used resistance. Now, when the picture was somehow turned upside down, Fatah and the PLO decided by Oslo Times, 1993, that is, armed struggle is no longer successful, and they geared up into another strategy, that is peace talks, and they refrained publicly and effectively from using resistance, armed struggle. They started to lose popularity. And Hamas by that time was already there by late 1980s and started to say, we do resistance. And so Hamas started to gain legitimacy and popularity, whereas Fatah started to lose this. And we can gauge this by using the notional tool of resistance, because Hamas now is doing resistance. So this is why I keep focus on this. This is the core of the Palestinian struggle. This is the core of maybe Palestinian existence under occupation. That is, you need to do resistance. Now, Israel, the Americans, and many others, they designate this as terrorism. That is their story. That is their, which is for me totally rejected and should not be taken. Now, within this this dynamics, where the rise of Hamas and the decline of Fatah because of the use or lack of use of resistance, we ended up in the Palestinian scene with this kind of division. You have two strategies. One strategy saying we tried armed struggle and we failed. So we have been maybe, I don't know, forced, compelled to try the peace talks strategy. Started with Oslo again, accords between the PLO and Israel in 1993. Now, just a little bit about these agreements or accords. In 1993, the PLO, which is the Palestine Liberation Organization, the official spokesbody and leader of the Palestinians, agreed with Israel on the so-called two-state solution, by which the Palestinians or the PLO gave away 78% of the historical land of Palestine, saying we recognize Israel on this part. In return, we will have a Palestinian state, or hopefully we will have a Palestinian state in the 22% left, that is in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So these two parts, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip put together constitute, the future Palestinian state. So it was massive compromise. For many, many Palestinians, that was capitulation, in fact, surrender to Israel and the Zionist project. For the PLO and the Palestinian leadership at the time said, well, this is the best that we can get given the realities. We don't have military power. We don't have, even the Arab countries are not, their support is minimal. They are weak. We don't have any global power supporting us. The Soviet Union is no longer there, even if that support was calibrated as well. So there was, given the realities, this is the best that we can get. Now, after 5 years, 1993, that was the promise. By 5 years, there is the interim period, 5 years, and then permanent period. Once the interim period of 5 years ends, a Palestinian state must have been established, which of course didn't happen. So Oslo promised by 1999 a Palestinian state should be there. So this is the promise. This is why the PLO, many Palestinians were hopeful. Hamas rejected this because they said Palestine is from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River, and we don't accept any compromise. This is our land, and even if the circumstances are not doing well in our favor, we should not kind of surrender this and give such a compromise. So they started doing resistance. Fatah started doing peace talks. Now you have lack of unification in the strategy, and that affected the Palestinian achievements in both ways, maybe in peace talks and even in resistance. So you have two forces somehow working against each other. Yes, every one of them is saying this is for the national interest, but effectively you have disharmony in the Palestinian politics and resistance. So that was really did work against the Palestinian interest, and one can see the achievements of maybe one party in this area in peace talks is somehow almost destroyed by the efforts of the other side, and vice versa. So instead of joining forces, maybe, I don't know, doing different roles, even in resistance and peace talks, but with one approach and one focus, one compass, the Palestinian effort was somehow disorganized and didn't do well. We ended up in 2006. Okay, Oslo Accord did not give the Palestinian state as promised. We ended up in 2006 with Palestinian elections under the umbrella of Oslo Accords. Oslo Accords created so-called Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is some local authority in charge of civil service, health, education, roads, I don't know, collecting rubbish, but has nothing to do with foreign policy, sovereignty, general security or border security. So in fact, it is only like municipality or local authority. And this has been in fact made by Israel. They borrowed maybe a couple of leaves from the British experience in India, that you delegate some local authority to local rulers so that you get rid of the burden of the daily running of the people under occupation, and you just focus on the bigger picture and the security, borders, foreign policy, army, this and that. And it has been successful, not only in India, but also in Africa. This is a common colonial practice, that you create local authority from within the people under occupation, and then you give them some limited authorities, so you have no headache with running the daily business of the people. Yet at the same time, this happens and this takes place under your own supervision. You have the final and ultimate say. Now, this authority has elections. Yasser Arafat used to be the head of this authority. Nowadays, Mahmoud Abbas is the head of this authority, again with limited forces and powers. had elections in 2006. Hamas won these elections. And it was very ironical because this was an elections that took place under the umbrella of Oslo agreements that Hamas rejected. So there was some contradiction, a paradoxical, if you like, condition. Hamas found itself, they ran for the elections not to win them, again, ironically. They wanted to have a big share of the seats in the Palestinian Council, but not the majority. They surprised themselves and others by winning these elections. So everybody was shocked, surprised. I argue even Hamas themselves, they were surprised because they didn't plan this. And that is part of what I call, most of the time, a quick, unexpected victories on the side of Hamas, leading to unexpected high cost. And they paid high cost. How come you are a resistance movement now? You are in power of this Oslo structure under the Israeli ultimate control, ruling in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, of course, not ruling, but in fact, administering, the civil services. So there was some sort of contradiction. Hamas wanted to avoid the war on terror at the time, led by George W. Bush after 9/11. We go back in time. So there was this massive global war on terror, and different countries in different regions should subscribe and join this war on terror so that they fight their local or the regional terror organization. The Americans pushed Mahmoud Abbas to join this war on terror, meaning that he has to fight what the terror group in the neighborhood, that is Hamas. And so Hamas avoided this, in fact, by joining the elections. They wanted to avoid being targeted and seen as a terror group in the region. And anyway, this is another story. But since then, Hamas controlled Gaza Strip 2007 all the way to 2023, which is leading to October 7th. In these years, Gaza Strip suffered continuous stream of wars, 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2015, 18, 20, 21, 23. So every year or a couple of years, Israel would launch war against the Gaza Strip and Hamas, and they call it mowing the lawn, meaning, okay, the grass, the resistance is growing too much to be accepted, so we just cut it. So every 2 years max, they would have a war against the Gaza Strip and Hamas. So that was kind of the background. That it was, and of course, Gaza, where Hamas was squeezed and cornered, became under air, sea, and land blockade. Everything, every food, medical supplies, everything that you can think of should go through very scrutinizing process to be allowed to get into the Gaza Strip. So you have people under this kind of pressure, and the Gaza Strip was boiling. Every single observer, every single maybe expert about Palestine or Gaza was expecting this explosion. I myself, I wrote in 2016 and 2017 an article saying the coming explosion of Gaza, because again, it's like you are pressurizing people, and then the expected result is, again, physics. It will explode in your face. So the explosion of October the 7th was very much expected by so many people. Now, one thing that I need maybe worthy of mentioning, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza and the leader of the organizer of October 7th, he gave a speech, he gave a press conference, very long press conference. It's online, everyone can check it out. I summarized this in my book, in the postscript kind of piece. And he said in 2021, note, the date, 2021, that was 2 years before October 7th. He said, he basically spelled out, the different stages leading to October. He said, we have tried every single way. We have adopted non-violent strategy. We had the so-called March of Return in 2018, going peaceful ones, peaceful demonstrations and big march going to the borders of Gaza Strip with the Israeli military. Again, non-violent ones. We try to scream out and tell the people we are under this massive pressure and we can't handle it any longer. We tried this and right. The only resort that we have is explosion. And if we explode, we will go beyond borders and we will go to Israeli, I don't know, settlements, towns, and bases. He said this publicly in a press conference. Maybe the Israelis, of course, they were watching. Maybe they didn't take this seriously, but he said we did this and that, and he said in 2017 Hamas published a new document, a new charter, saying we accept, and that was again massive compromise, judging against Hamas's own principles. They said if a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip is to be established, we wouldn't reject this. We will accept this because the Palestinian consensus is hovering around this, but without recognizing Israel. So that was a massive step for Hamas. He mentioned this. He said we accepted the Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, basically the so-called two-state solution. Nobody listened to us. So he said all these options were blocked in our face. We are left with only explosion. And then the explosion did take place in October 7th. Now we all know the following consequences, of course, and the genocide that took for 2 years. As I said, the first maybe the unique genocide that has been happening in our world while everybody was watching. In the second part of my talk, and then we move to the future. In this part, if everybody is watching, I can frame this massive assault now on the Palestinians, massive attack, not only the genocide, the military genocide, which is very well known and seen by everyone, but now we have a political attack on the Palestinians. And I frame it within two things. That is, there is not only intent, but even massive effort by the Americans and the Israelis to remove Palestine and the Palestinians as people from the map. We have some kind of inhabitants, we have some groups living here and there, but they are not Palestinian people. They don't constitute an entity with identity, with national identity that could be called people. So we have now two forces. One is to remove Palestine and the Palestinian people from the scene. And then we have the resistance effort and force that is to keep Palestine and to materialize Palestine and the Palestinian people on the ground. Within this kind of political assault on the Palestinian people, note this and try to keep it in your maybe follow-up in the coming years and times. The Israelis and the Americans, they don't use the term Palestinian people because, again, terms and discourse are so crucial and very important. Even back in Oslo agreement text, the Palestinian people, this term was not used, was avoided. They would say the Palestinians. So if you say the Palestinians, okay, some groups of people scattered here and there, you have so many groups, so many sub-nations living in this world, not necessarily having peoplehood or nationhood, so they don't deserve to be called a people. If you are a people, this means you are a nation, then you have legitimacy to claim a state. We call it nation state. If you're a nation, the next step must come with a state. But if we say no, you are not a nation. The Palestinians, they are not a people. They don't have anything to do with peoplehood or nationhood. They are Palestinians. Like in the region in the West Asia, we have another kind of cause, another problem, which is to do with the Kurds. They call them the Kurds, not the Kurdish people. If you say the Kurdish people, they are people, they need a state, and they have the legitimacy to claim a state. So this is even at the terminology and language scale. The so-called Trump plan, the 20 points of a plan to resolve the conflict according to their language in Gaza, doesn't use the Palestinian people. It says Gazan, or the people in Gaza. So again, this is a technique and ways of linguistic acrobats, maybe, to diminish, to finish, to destroy any discourse to do with Palestine and the Palestinian people. If I take you back to 2020, there was something called the deal of the century by Trump again in his first term. The deal of the century. And that deal was published 183 pages. I examined, that the text, the full text, all the terminology is again the same thing. The Palestinians, not the Palestinian people. On the page, on the cover page of the plan, it says, I think, a plan for prosperity and peace for the Israeli people and Palestinians. Israeli people. The Israelis are a people, and the Palestinians. So there is, from this, the terminology, and then all the way up to the physical presence of the Palestinians. All this is under an attempt of destruction. And we see this now. This is kind of the abstract, the linguistic kind of thing, the discourse thing. Now, at the ground level, we can see this. We can see the implementation of this on a daily basis. We have seen it materialized in the genocide in Gaza, where the idea is to turn the Gaza Strip unlivable space. So even if there is no war, no nothing, the Palestinians, they will never ever be able to live in Gaza Strip, so they will leave voluntarily, quote unquote, which is not, of course, voluntarily, because you created conditions by which nobody can live here any longer. And this is until this very moment, as we speak, the so-called ceasefire. There's no ceasefire, by the way. The daily death is about 10 Palestinians killed by the Israeli army. So there is no ceasefire. During the genocide, the average rate was between 40 to 50. So it decreased, yes, but in fact, there is no ceasefire. But the idea, again, to kill the Palestinians, to destroy them, to destroy their everything to do with their life, schools, hospitals. So even if there was no single bullet, and let's assume you are there with your family, you are still alive with your family. Your kids can't go to school, your kids can't go to hospital, you don't have any work, so what are you gonna do? So basically, the first thing that comes to your mind is to find some solution to your family. Go away, just leave. So this is the core now idea of the expulsion of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The same takes place in the West Bank, but in a quiet way. My sister lives in Palestine, and on the other day, last week, in fact, the settlers, they attacked her and while doing the olive tree harvesting. She was there with her husband and kids, and the settlers, they just came around and they just attacked them and threatened them to leave, and they just left. And now the olives on the tree, then nobody can reach them. This happens in hundreds of Palestinian villages. Again, to turn the life of the Palestinians. We have almost 3.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, 2 million plus in the West, in the Gaza Strip. The idea of the Israeli strategy now, which is in the mainstream and in the government, with spokespersons of the government. This is not kind of marginal voices on extreme voices. This is the mainstream government discourse. Smotrich and Ben Gvir, these are ministers of the government. They say the Palestinians have three options. Again, this has been said by Smotrich, the finance minister, number 3 in the government. He said they have three options: either to leave, and which is we prefer, either to live under our control as second or 10th grade citizens, according to the Israeli law, regulations, and everything. Basically, you surrender. 3, if you reject these two, you have to face the wrath of the Israeli army, meaning you will be killed. So these are, can you imagine, these are repeatedly said by him and by others. That is the Palestinians in the West Bank, let alone the Gaza Strip. These are the options offered to the Palestinians. Now, other kind of maybe elements of the current state of affairs is globally, the removal of Palestine is not only attempted by Israel, but also by the Americans, and even at a larger scale. And think of the buying of TikTok. Think of not allowing Palestine to speak in, I don't know, in different fora, including the UN. Removing Palestine and the Palestinian existence, expressions, and everything from any possible kind of platform or hub. So all these kind of things happening under the title of trying to remove Palestine. Against all this, we can see another wave of keeping and materializing Palestine. And this is, I end by this. This is kind of part of the, let's say, the good side of the story. That is, we can see this global awakening about Palestine. This, the broken of barrier of fear in terms of criticizing Israel, Zionism, and even saying America and the United States is led by Israel or under Israeli influence. We have massive, let's say, discoveries by so many people. The youth in the streets of Washington and New York and American universities, European universities, British universities, all the way to Japan, South Korea. There is a massive awakening about Palestine because of the genocide, because of this live stream genocide, and people started to question the very difficult questions, the taboo questions. The red lines have been crossed. This kind of ceiling that was imposed on the people by the mainstream media, controlled by Americans and Israeli lobbies in the United States, is no longer there. So people now speak up, which is of course amazing, turning the tide, turning this move of trying to remove Palestine to materialize Palestine everywhere. Now, I think I maybe even took more time than I should, but let me kind of finish by a couple of remarks on the future. The future is very difficult, of course, to predict because things move very, very fast, but there are some non-promising realities and there are some promising realities. Of the non-promising realities, as I mentioned, the Palestinian division. The Palestinian division is unfortunately lasted until this very moment, despite the 2 years of genocide in Gaza. The Palestinians failed in putting their effort together and unifying their effort. Of course, this is their responsibility, first and foremost, but at the same time, there were structural kind of conditions imposed on their different factions. If you get closer, you will be punished, especially the Palestinian Authority. If there is any form of unifying efforts with Hamas, this means we will cut off, in fact, all the financial support, all this and that, and then you will die. All the Palestinian Authority will collapse. So throughout, in fact, the years, these conditions were imposed on the Palestinian Authority to be fair and not to absolve the Palestinians from the responsibility of this continuous split, but again to say other factors have been really very influential in keeping this, again, in line with the colonial classical mantra, divide and rule. Now, another kind of non-promising thing, which is the current state of weakness. And then I would go even further and say capitulation to Israeli and American policies and demands. And we can see this in the normalization processes between Israel and this and that country. So this is very unfortunate, very kind of disheartening, in fact, that is at the time of genocide where Palestinians are killed in mass. You have some Arab states and Muslim states. I heard about Indonesia thinking and contemplating to normalize relations with Israel. Israel that has been convicted by genocide and the ICC and other kind of there was not a single respected human rights organization in the globe that didn't describe what was happening in Gaza as a genocide. And then at the same time, some Arab and Muslim countries, they still talk about normalizing as if rewarding the criminal, rewarding the genocidal party. Another kind of a gloomy and non-promising thing is this massive failure on the side of the international system, international law, UN institutions and agencies. And that was stunning. That was so shocking. That is, despite the proven evidence, nothing was taken seriously to stop the massacre, to stop the genocide. So this makes us, in fact, forces all of us to think again about, the whole international system, what kind of reform it needs urgently, so that if there is another genocide, another episode of this, not only against the Palestinians, against any other people, then the world should move fast and effectively to stop such a thing. Now, within Israel, the last thing in the non-promising thing, aspects or points, and then I move to some more maybe hopeful picture. Within Israel, the genocidal strategies and the genocidal mind and discourse have become mainstream. In the past, let's say maybe 20, 30 years ago, it was there, but in the margins. So nobody, not a single maybe minister would dare to say, we want to kill all the Palestinians. We have to wipe out Gaza off the surface of earth. But this language, and along with the strategies, expel the strategies. You have strategies, you have institutionalized departments in the government, in the Israeli government, to supervise the expulsion of the Palestinians. Now this has become mainstream. So again, this is non-promising for the short-term future. Some kind of a promising realities. As I said, there is now maybe even deeper conviction among many Palestinians, despite all the high cost. That is, there is no coexistence with this genocidal mentality. We need to resist, and we have to resist as long as there is an occupation and colonialism. The only way forward is to resist it. Not necessarily, well, by force, by non-violent means, by diplomacy, by all means, but resistance is there. And this has been the right that even the UN enshrined in the UN Charter, UN resolutions, and everywhere. The second kind of, for me, is promising, and people should think outside the current depressing moment. Trump is not here forever. He is not a destiny. 3 years and then he will be gone. So, and the Palestinian people will remain in their own land, and the struggle will go on and move to another phase, another episode. Because in the region now, there is this fear. The people are so scared. Officials, non-officials, governments, they think of this ghost, Trump, that he can like a blind elephant, trumps everybody around him, doesn't care about anything. So people are scared. But this again, this condition is passing. It is not here to last. Also, the Arab weakness is not something that is permanent. Yes, it betrayed the Palestinians and made them exposed to others, to Israel and Americans. But again, this is not necessarily staying for forever. Let's go back maybe 15 years only when the Arab revolutions took place in the region, across the region. Back then in 2010, nobody thought that is the Arab region was suffering from this stagnation, suffering from dictators, and nobody would do anything. No freedoms, no democracy, no nothing. And even within Middle Eastern, West Asian experts, there was no single expert expected revolution, this wave of revolutions across the region. So peoples and societies, they move in a very surprising way. So we can't just say this is a closed down case and then that's it. The weakness of the Arabs is not characterizing their future. Maybe characterizes their present, but not necessarily the future. We don't know what the youth movement are having and promising in the future. And the other one at the global level, as I said, mentioned this kind of massive, great awakening about Palestine. Palestine has become the metaphor for justice globally, universally. It is not only a case of the last maybe case of classical colonialism and settler colonialism, but also it has become, you know, the embodiment of justness and all causes of justice rallying behind Palestine. Let me stop here. I have a couple of points, but I think again all this has taken longer than I thought and planned. And thank you for your attention and listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Khaled Al-Hroub, for your extremely enriching, educating, and comprehensive discussion which you just have made. And the uniqueness of the crisis, the way this crisis has been covered by international media, as if, as you rightly have pointed out, that as if the conflict is taking place between two parties, two equal parties. And in this way, as if Israel is not an occupying force, as if Israel is not a nuclear power, and as if Hamas is a super state entity. So this asymmetry, both in war and in media narratives, has been quite disturbing. I completely agree with you. At the same time, you have highlighted amid all these gloomy scenario, some sort of a ray of hope, how things are not permanent in international politics, how the departure of imminent departure of Trump in the next term might change many calculations in the Middle East, how the changes within the Arab Streets, the potential, the future political changes in the Arab world might change things. So it means that what I understand from your discussion is that even though Trump administration has imposed one sort of solution as of now, but still what I understand is that this is not the final solution, and struggle is still going on, and the Palestinian statehood is still will remain a major aspiration, as I understand. So it means that as long as the Palestinian statehood is an unmet dream, it means that the possibility and the future of such resistance, such struggle and demands and movements like Hamas, with this name or with other names, will remain there, will remain relevant. So it doesn't matter whether its name is Hamas or its name is another name, but the aspiration of Palestinian statehood is going to be there for a long time, and the world has to be ready for these kind of future aspirations and their ways of expressing their aspirations, as you have rightly pointed out in the beginning. That we have to learn that to struggle for your national determination, your national independence is not terrorism. We have to stop the Western propaganda and Western imposition on West Asia and on us, that we must call Palestinian struggle as terrorism. Palestinian struggle is not terrorism, should not be called terrorism, should not be securitized, as you have rightly pointed out. And unfortunately, we have seen that Palestinian issue has been reduced into an issue of international security, terrorism, extremism, everything except the people's problem, the issues of the people who belong to that land. So thank you very much for your comprehensive discussion, and I must say that students and our researchers and friends must have benefited from this. I would like to invite my friends and those who are present here, if they would like to ask any question, they can raise their hand, or they can also post their questions in the chat box. We can read them from there, but you can also raise your hand here. Dr. Moin, would you like to make few remarks? Yes, anyone? Dr. Moin, yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Professor. Me and my 6-year-old son were listening to you with full curiosity, and I have been a researcher, and maybe sometime later I'll introduce my work as well. But I think as a journalist, I have been, following this entire, I would say, genocide. It is not wrong to call it genocide. And I happened to visit Israel just before 2023. And I met some Palestinians over there in the occupied territories as well. And I could see that, the situation that was there, obviously people do not talk much about what is going to happen, but there was a sense of unease amongst the Palestinians, and they were just looking for something to happen. And they were, obviously they were expecting that the international community would, get its act together and help them in raising their voice. Unfortunately, the neighboring Arab countries were busy in the so-called Abraham Accords and, other deals with the state of Israel. So a lot of things were going on parallelly, and as you've said, you've pointed out the statement made by Yahya Sinwar. I think that was reflective of the fact that what was going on within Gaza, because of course Gaza remained unreachable for the international, community. A lot of people who go to Israel or to the Palestinian territories, they just, remain there, and most of them cannot get into Gaza, and they really depend on the international media, which is mostly Western media, to get their information from. So I think thank you very much for this lecture, and I'm sure that most of us will benefit. Most of us will reflect, on this. It's just sinking in. And I mean, I would fail if I don't mention my own excitement about listening to you. So hopefully we'll get back together again if our researchers require you. And thank you, Dr. Omair Anas. Thank you, Ahmad, for organizing this in such a short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohin, for the kind and so gracious comment. You reminded me of something. It's there in my comments, but I didn't have the time maybe to go through it. That is, the conditions before 2023, before October's explosion. In my book and somewhere else, I calculated it's very hard to do. It is sometimes it's inhumane, to compare the number of deaths among people and civilians. But because this is one of the main reasons why Hamas is designated as a terrorist organization, why Hamas is seen, not only Hamas, Fatah, the Popular Front before that, Marxist faction, terrorist, all of them terrorist organizations, because the idea is, or the main accusation is killing civilians. And I keep saying, okay, if this is the criterion, let's use this, killing civilians, and then describe any party, be it a state or a non-state actor, and say, well, if this party is killing civilians, then this is a terrorist party. This is a terrorist state. This is a terrorist company. This is whatever. If this is the criterion, killing civilians. So I went through the figures of Palestinian civilians killed by Israel and the Israeli civilians killed by Hamas and other Palestinian factions throughout the years, or at least since the first Intifada. We had a Palestinian rebellion, if you like, uprising against Israel in late 1980s. Since then until now, and look at the figures. On average, since late 1980s until 6th of October, before 7th of October, the average is for every single Israeli civilian, there are between 12 to 24 Palestinian civilians killed by Israel. So this is the ratio. The highest ratio killed, the highest is 1 to 12 for the Israelis. The lowest is 1 to 24. If you kill one Israeli civilian, the Israelis will kill 24. Anyway, again, this is before the genocide. After the genocide, when I was finishing this book, it came out a few months back, the ratio was 1 to 48. Now, as we speak, it's 1 to 70. For every single Israeli civilian killed in October 7th, you have 70 Palestinian civilians. There are some figures still disappearing. We have at least 10,000 to 12,000 Palestinian civilians are disappeared. They thought of to be covered under rubble and all of that. If we add this, as we speak, the ratio goes to almost 90, between 90 to 100. So if you are designating any Palestinian faction as a terrorist organization because of the killing of civilians that we all against, I am against any kill of civilians, be it made by Hamas or Fatah or Israel or anybody. These civilians should be neutralized. And by the way, Hamas issued since 1994, they issued an offer, an initiative to Israel saying, let's neutralize the civilians from the killing. Target us only as military people, and we target the Israeli army. Let's agree on this so that civilians on both sides are neutralized. And that offer was repeated and repeated and repeated. Israel never even replied, never accepted. So there was an effort on the Palestinian side to neutralize this kind of killing, the killing of civilians. Anyway, so this is part of the picture. And another part, this is why I call it, before October 7th, I call it the silent killing of the Palestinians. So it's low profile, under the radar. The killing of Palestinian settlers here and there, nobody. Now we are in a noisy killing of the Palestinians. So people, what is happening? Because the scale has jumped greatly. Now things went back to the before October 7th, the accepted daily rate of killing Palestinians, when nobody cares. The cameras are focusing somewhere else, which is around 10, which is massive. How come the whole world accepts, not only for the Palestinians, for any other people? This is why we are so worried about, the international system. If you have people are killed in the Congo or Sierra Leone or Argentina on this rate, we have to raise our voice. There's something wrong in our world, and we should not accept the killing of civilians anywhere at this rate without any accountability, without stopping it, without the standard.
Yeah, do we have any other question? Okay, I don't see, but I have to ask, because I have been thinking about this aspect of this conflict. A few decades before, we used to think that the so-called third world, India, Russia, and China, might have a different point of view about Palestine, and their diplomacy, their influence in global politics might be helpful in the resolution of Palestinian conflict. In this episode of conflict, we have seen that Russia, India, and China are nowhere. All solutions, good or bad, every solution, every initiative, good or bad, you agree or disagree, have come from the West. Which means that the West will remain in key position to impose its will, its plan on Palestinian future. And unfortunately, the absence or the lack of influence or the disinterest of global South, the so-called global South, including India and China and Russia, they have completely backed out from offering any kind of support for Palestine, except for giving some arms and some charity. How do you think that the Arab countries have no other option except to rush to Western capitals to save? That is why you were right when you criticize the Trump plan, and everyone has to criticize it. But the reality is that there is no other plan. Russia does not have anything to offer. China did not offer. India has nothing to offer for Palestine. So nobody, no country, no other power in the world has offered any other alternative to this solution. There is only one solution, which is coming from Trump. So how do you see this unfortunate development?
Yeah, a couple of things. The first one to do with the Arab region, and the other one to do with the global system, global powers. To do with the Arab region and Arab countries, as everybody knows, now the Arab region is ruled and controlled by a bunch of dictators. And when you have authoritarian regimes ruling their countries, the rational calculations and the way decisions are taken are not necessarily in the interest of the nation or the interest of, let's say, the Arabs, or it's in the interest of the ruling elite. So these ruling elites, they care much about their existence in power. They most of them lack national legitimacy. from within their own countries, and they are already so scared of their own people. Their legitimacy comes from the outside support and foreign support. So when the Americans, Trump, or even before Trump, when they deal with X or Y ruler, in this case, they are giving legitimacy to him or her in the eyes of the people. So to compensate the lack of internal legitimacy, we support you so that we can control you. We can just buy over the phone. I call you Omair, you are the dictator of X or Y country, and I ask you to lower, let's say, I don't know, the price of oil, the oil price. Listen, this is too much. Cut it down $10. Then because I can't, I rely on you, I rely on America, I rely on Europe to maintain me in power. I would do this. The Europeans and the Americans, they are happy with this kind of distribution of power. That is, instead of doing business and politics with elected governments, that if Omair is elected and I ask him to lower the oil price, Omair said, no, I have to ask the parliament. I have to ask my government. I have to do this and that. I am accountable to them. And I have legitimacy. I can say even no to you, and I am supported internally. They don't have this. So we have, this is maybe a very trivial kind of example, but by and large, in terms of security, economy, loans, even family business, family affairs, all is controlled by outside powers. So these rulers, these governments, they lack any legitimacy. This is why the Arab revolutions of 2011, they have been fought against by all you have the counter-revolution forces led by a bunch of dictators in the region, but backed by the Americans and Europeans, just to maintain the status quo of authoritarian regimes, that we can do business with them individually. We don't want you to take the case, the demand, whatever we want, to take it to a parliament, elected parliament. This means power. This means the power of the people. This means the will of the people. So what we are seeing now is not the translation of the will of the Arab peoples. It is the mood, the decisions of Arab dictators. These are calculated according to different calculations, not necessarily in the interest of the Palestinians, or even in the interest of their own people. So this is to do, again, not kind of to explain everything but maybe something that we need to keep in mind when we think of the Arab responses. Globally, when it comes, the Palestinians, I myself, many Palestinians, they were deeply frustrated by the powers that you have mentioned, China, primarily China, India, and Russia. Because if we talk about the global South, if we talk about a reformed global system that should break away from the structure that we inherited after the Second World War, where you have the 5 superpowers controlling the politics of our globe, and we say, this is unfair. You have emerging powers, we have emerging dynamics and politics and peoples, and we need to think and rethink what is happening. If these 3 powers remain silent on a genocidal case that has been happening for 2 full years, this is amazing. This means there is no promise. I mean, the whole talk about global South and emerging and multipolar world, and we need again to dismantle this kind of control of Western. It left us with deep, really frustration. China, we know that China is having a plan that is, by the year, I think 2049, they want to be the great power. That is the anniversary of the 100 years anniversary. So they don't want to be distracted. Russia may be in Ukraine. India, I don't know what. India, even maybe double frustration from India. India is our classical our leader in anti-colonial efforts. So when we study colonialism, when we study any resistance movement, we take the lead from the Indian experience, be it armed struggle, strong rebellious movements, or even non-violent movements. This is India. And then India is siding by more or less by Israel, by the aggressor, by the colonial power. So we can't even comprehend this. What is happening? So I just share with you maybe the grievances, and maybe I don't have answers, but I think all of us, we need to put so much effort in activating in new directions, in new politics, in new diplomacy, new campaigning to resurrect, this power, the so-called global South. Otherwise, the global North will just keep playing with us against each other every now and then.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Professor. If there is no any other question, I have asked 2 questions, and I think that Professor also has spoken almost an hour and must be feeling tired. But it was immensely educating, insightful talk by you. And I look forward to host you again on our platform. And also I look forward to have you in India, in New Delhi, in our universities, in person in coming months and years, inshallah. Because we need more professors and speakers like you who should give us an impartial analysis of such situations. And I would say that this talk has indeed helped us, all of us, to understand the crisis. So on behalf of IDDF, I would like to thank you again. And I would like to thank everyone who is joining the program, despite the some gap of communication. But I'm sure that this talk is going far to other audience as well. So I would like to close the program here. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting, and thank you for attendance and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Subhash.
Thank you, man.
अच्छा हुआ, बहुत अच्छा हुआ.
बहुत wonderful.